Welcome to Backyard Philosophy, a podcast where a couple friends grab some cold ones, sit around the fire, and talk about science, philosophy, and history. Crack one open, sit back, and get a good laugh as we discuss everything from automation to why the meaning of life is 42. Wars are fought for many reasons: land, greed, liberty, but few wars are fought with noble intentions and purpose. This isn't one of them. This might be the dumbest reason a war has ever started, even more than the Greeks fighting the Trojans over a single woman. This is the War of the Oaken Bucket. But before I tell the tale of this war, Nick, how are you and what are you drinking?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to hear one of the dumbest reasons a war has been fought, and I'm drinking some Dead Guy Ale.
Both going to our classics today. You're drinking some Dead Guys, I'm drinking some Buffalo Trace. But the War of the Oaken Bucket, a war fought literally over a bucket in 1325. But before this war starts, I need to set the scene. The place is northern Italy, between two rival city-states, Bolognese and the Modena.
Italians, this makes sense.
The Bolognese and the Modena are two city-states, less than 32 miles apart from one another. And these two city-states have hated each other for a very long time, and their entire history together is less than pleasant. The Modena and the Bolognese first got their rivalry from a pope, Pope John XII, who in his conquering in 1154 to become the Holy Roman Emperor, divided these two cities. Funny how the pope causes more wars than solves more wars. More than a century later, in 1296, the Bolognese attacked the Modena lands, taking land from the Modena. Small skirmishes of taking opponents' land and losing it the next day was kind of common at this point in northern region, especially in Italy. And again, this is 1296, so medieval ages, we're kind of in the height of it. And it's also important to note that the people in favor of the Pope at this time, left the Bolognese territory. Many of the Pope favorites were the Modena at this time. A divide between city-states and church, again, it's kind of common for Italy at this time. Then, in 1309, a Ronaldo Passierano Boscolini became ruler of the Modena territories. He kept the hatred for the Bolognese alive and launched attacks after attacks on controlled territories of Bolognese. In turn, the Pope at this time, Pope John the 22nd, so quite a lot of Pope Johns since then, declared Ronaldo of Modena an enemy of the church. Favoritism at its best. The Pope declared that all sins would automatically be forgiven to anyone who successfully attacked Ronaldo and his property. Could you imagine getting a green light, Nick, of just doing whatever you want and the church automatically forgives you?
Yeah, that's a pretty sweet deal right there. It's like, you know what? You know how Jesus died for our sins? You know how else you can be forgiven of all your sins? Go kill that fucking guy. That's the most Italian thing I've ever heard.
Then the year 1325 rolls around, a year of fighting. The Bolognese pillaged and killed farms and villagers. The Bolognese in turn attacked a Bolognese fort.
How big were each of these territories? I don't know if you know.
Well, they're only 32 miles apart and they're neighboring. They did have smaller cities, loose term on cities, kind of villages and territories. So it was more like a city-state, and then the surrounding area was kind of their city. It was much more a legit city, and following countryside's part of their territory. If I had to guess, based on a map of seeing them, no more than 50 miles each in diameter for these city-states.
Gotcha. It's pretty big size.
Yeah, but considering it's the 1300s, medieval ages, a lot of people are dead from the bubonic plague. People are moving to the Crusades. Most of it's probably farmland to feed the people. I'm not expecting a high population at this time. I don't know the population numbers at the point, which, after I get the statistics of the soldiers, it might give you an idea of how big the territories are. So a year of fighting, the Mogonese attacking the Bolognese attacking the Modenese. This would go on throughout the entire year, taking prisoners, giving them back, burning down crops, the whole 9 yards. Then, November 15th of 1325, the most treasonous act one could imagine. Worse than both sides slaughtering each other for no reason. Worse than burning the farms and crops to the ground. Worse than being excommunicated from the church at this time. A bucket was taken.
No. Tell me it isn't so.
The morning of November 15th, 1325, a few Maltese soldiers sneaked into the city of Bologna, stole a bucket. This bucket, located in the center, well, almost center of the city, was made from oak, and why they stole it is under speculation. By some accounts, the bucket was filled with spoils to show off the Bolognese victories over the Maltese. By other accounts, it was just a bucket to draw water from a well in the city. Nick, do you want to take a guess what this bucket looked like?
I mean, is it going to look like every bucket if I just Google search wooden bucket?
It quite literally looks like the Minecraft bucket. It is wood oak and 2 metal rings. That is it. It is the most plain, ordinary bucket I have ever seen in my entire life. And Nick, do you want to take a guess what ensued after the bucket was stolen?
I'm going to say 300 people died in the fighting. 375, that's my number.
Add a 0 at the end of that and you're closer.
What kind of conflict is this? If there's no deaths.
Oh no, there's deaths. There's lots of deaths. I said add a 0 to the end of your number to increase the number of deaths.
Oh, are you fucking kidding me?
No. Well, the Bolognese demanded the bucket to be returned to them at once. The Maltese simply said no. So in a calm, completely rational manner, the Bolognese declared war on the Maltese because they took their bucket. The Bolognese then raised an army of nearly 30,000 foot soldiers and 2,000 cavalry. In return, the Maltese raised an army of 5,000 foot soldiers and 2,000 cavalry. The Maltese, with a smaller force, took on the offensive and attacked the Bolognese first. The Bolognese were the ones who took the bucket. Attacking when the sun was setting on the field in, sorry if I mispronounced this, Zuribega. Caught off guard at this evening attack, the Bolognese were forced to retreat and regroup at the city of Bulgaria, their capital. And again, these two cities are a little more than 30 miles from each other, so they didn't really have far to go. Still on the offensive, the Bolognese marched to the city walls. But rather than sieging the city,
they stole a broom.
Oh god, that'd be a mop and a broom. Oh, that'd be hilarious. No, they actually did a very calculated attack. For those who don't know, sieging a castle is kind of hard to do. It's a very long process. So instead of rather sieging the city capital, they attacked outer castles and captured 26 nobles who were loyalty laid with the Bolognese. Fighting and skirmishes would continue for a little over a year. An estimated 2,000 men would be killed in the fight over a bucket. Not to mention how many farms were raided, not how many innocents were dispersed, not how many innocents were killed. And in January of 1326, a quote-unquote treaty would be made. But peace did not ensue. The war, or wars, continued until 1529, a little over 200 years later. This period of war in northern Italy, with these two fractions, are now called the Ghibelline-Guelph Wars. And the only reason the war ended between these two city-states is because they had to join together to repel a foreign invader. That's right, they had bad blood, but the bucket kicked it all off. They would still be fighting each other over 200 years later if it wasn't for Charles I of Spain invading Italy in 1529.
Okay, so hold on. Let's just redo some numbers here. So, number of buckets stolen. One, okay. Number of people killed.
The first year, 2,000.
Okay, in number of years the war was fought?
Over 200.
Yeah, that seems right. One bucket.
Don't get me wrong. There were multiple quote-unquote peace times, but it was constant fight. It was like Sparta versus Athens. They just kept fighting. It was just two dogs going at it constantly.
This is just like the medieval equivalent of just some Italian New Yorker just being like, I'm walking here. And then you get in a fight with the cab driver.
These guys are literally neighbors. Their territories touch. They could be trading with each other. They could form alliances. They are literally 32 miles away from each other, the capitals of each of their city-states. Yet they're killing each other. Granted, the history of them isn't great, but what sparked it all was a bucket. A bucket. And about this bucket, Nick, if you had a guess, or if you've been asking yourself, What happened to the bucket?
I really want to know. Please tell me it's in a museum somewhere. It belongs in a museum.
Calm down, Indy. It sort of does. Well, apparently, the original is in Plazo Comunal, which is in the people who took it territory.
The only thing better than that would be if someone was just still using it today.
Some farmer in the countryside.
Just milking cows with it.
Well, the original, I found no real evidence to back it up that it's still in that Plaza Comunal, but there is an exact replica, apparently. Well,
because someone's using the real one.
There is a replica in the Modena kept in the Torre della Galinda. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But again, I just want to reiterate the first year. 30,000 versus 5,000 foot soldiers. 2,000 mounted cavalry, versus another 2,000 mounted cavalry. 26 nobles who would be kidnapped. Multiple forts taken. Multiple farms burned. Over an oak bucket.
I guess I don't understand what you're not understanding about this situation.
And it took a foreign invader, Charles I, invading Italy to unite these two groups together. I guess history repeats itself. Sparta and Athens joined together to fight the Persians. Italians were killing each other. They just needed Spain to come along.
The only thing Italians hate more than other Italians is other Europeans.
But that is the tale of the War of the Oaken Bucket. A war started where thousands of men would fight because a bucket was stolen from the center of a city. And if I had to wager, it was not filled with gold or treasure. More than likely, it was just an ordinary bucket. Some soldiers were just being rowdy, and they stole a bucket that would cause over a 200-year on and off conflict. That is, I mean, those two cities were just asking for a fight, and they were looking for any reason to fight.
Ideally, what happened is that the soldiers who stole it were just like drunk wandering around and like, oh, just puke in this bucket. No one's ever going to know.
Nick, I imagine both me and you over the years have gotten into dumb arguments with friends, dumb fights with family members.
Well, I am married, so no, I have not.
I was thinking more of your brother, but have you ever gotten so pissed over something so benign as someone taking your bucket?
I'm going to revert you back to, well, yes, I am married, Mike, so yeah.
Well, I guess you can relate to the northern Italy city-states. And that is so far the dumbest war I've ever come across. Hopefully, it will be the dumbest, and I won't come across any more dumb. If you do know any dumber ones, please hit us up on Instagram or YouTube. And as always, thank you all for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Backyard Philosophy Podcast. We rarely finish a podcast without missing a point we wanted to bring up, so let us know what we forgot. And if you have a topic you want us to talk about, let us know at Backyard Philosophy on Instagram